We need to work at how do we create the kind of recovery that benefits people.
With 48 hours warning, King Charles witnessed his wife of over 20 years being dragged out of Clarence's house for an unexpected reason. We are not discussing marital issues, internal conflict, or a gradual breakup. We're talking about hidden bank accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands that were discovered during a regular audit. The repercussions were so swift and terrible that even the royal staff is still attempting to determine how this truly occurred. The inquiry is still ongoing. So before we get started, if you're new to Crown Watch, please hit subscribe to ensure you don't miss any developments. The message was released on December 3rd at 6:47 a.m. Not an ambiguous, diplomatically worded statement from the palace. It's not the kind of thing where you have to decipher their meaning by reading between the lines. This was straightforward. The first indication that things were seriously awry came when Buckingham Palace stated that the king had formally demanded parliamentary action about Camilla Parker Bowles' titles and position, specifically utilizing her pre-marriage name. According to the statement, it was no longer appropriate to maintain the Queen Consort title after significant financial irregularities and concealed accounts were found. It's not a statement of separation. It is a severing of an institution. You can tell they wanted this out there right away since they released it at 6:47 a.m., before most people had even begun their day. Don't wait for a news cycle. No precise timing. Simply let it out. The quickness is what really sets this apart. In any institution, but particularly in the monarchy, financial scandals usually take months to resolve. Investigations take place in private. Attorneys go over everything. Careful messaging is crafted by communications staff. Additionally, the entire situation has been turned into something manageable by the time the public learns about it. Here, that didn't occur. 5 days passed between the discovery and the announcement. 5 days after Charles discovered these accounts, Camilla's titles that she had earned over the previous 20 years were lawfully revoked. That isn't institutional caution. Rather, it's either overwhelming evidence or a degree of personal rage that overcame all natural tendencies towards slow management. And based on our current understanding, it was both. Something really dull was the catalyst for the whole thing. A law mandating more financial openness for top royals receiving public funds was passed by Parliament in May 2025. This was the kind of modernization push that governments prefer to undertake, motivated by public pressure for accountability, and it wasn't directed at any particular person. Complete asset disclosure, independent audits, and quarterly reporting of major transactions. Common governance practices that any public organization ought to be implementing by now. In September, the audit company Reynolds Partners began its thorough investigation. The king was the first to be addressed, followed by the Queen Consort's office. In all honesty, the Queen Consort's finances were meant to be simple, consisting of a personal fortune from her prior marriage settlement and an allowance from the Duchy of Lancaster. Typical household costs are accurately recorded. Nobody anticipated discovering anything intriguing. However, in October, when examining payment authorizations, an auditor by the name of Sarah Mitchell discovered something strange. Monthly payments were made to what looked to be a Luxembourg-based financial management company. The sums weren't huge, roughly £5,000 a month, but the palace accounting system didn't correctly classify them. Mitchell asked for documents outlining these payments, but the answers were ambiguous. It has to do with estate management services, but it's not really clear. Additionally, if you've ever worked in compliance or auditing, you are aware that ambiguous responses to particular queries are essentially warning signs. Mitchell requested direct communication with the Luxembourg firm in accordance with usual procedure. She found that the organization was not overseeing any valid estates associated with Camilla. It was a shell corporation whose main purpose seems to be to receive money from several sources and transfer it to accounts in other jurisdictions that were registered in Camilla's name. Any order would quickly identify the layers of obfuscation generated by the shell company's ownership by another business organization incorporated in the British Virgin Islands as a purposeful structure intended to hide financial activity. That's where things start to fall apart. Forensic accountants became involved and the picture quickly grew after Mitchell escalated to her senior partners and the palace was brought in. Between 2003 and 2005, 3 different accounts with total balances of around 3 were created at banks in Geneva and Zurich. £2 million. The transaction history revealed consistent deposits from a variety of sources, including accounts in jurisdictions that made tracking challenging and British entities. The low number of withdrawals indicated that these accounts were mainly used for accumulating rather than expenditure. The Cayman Islands accounts, which held more than £4 million, were then opened in 2007, just after Camilla and Charles were married. The money seemed to come mostly from transfers made in the UK, although it was hidden by intermediary accounts. This is the specific aspect that makes the chronology especially harmful. Through 2024, deposits continued on a regular basis. This was not old money she had forgotten about from before the marriage. She continued to do this throughout her tenure as Queen Consort and Duchess of Cornwall. Not passive omission, but active concealment. The third significant cluster, about one, was held by Luxembourg. £3 million, which appeared to act as a hub for a number of smaller payments that were then sent to the accounts in Cayman and Switzerland. Complex planning was implied by the construction. It's not the kind of thing you do by accident or because you simply never got around to discussing some old family accounts, but someone has considered how to shift money in ways that wouldn't be visible. The patterns became alarming when detectives began tracking the money's true source. Some seemed to originate from affluent people with ties to Prince Andrew's social circle, including a number who had been connected to dubious individuals or companies that were being looked into for financial issues. Additional deposits were linked to businesses in industries where a royal connection could be advantageous. Although direct pay-for-access arrangements have not been confirmed, investigators were concerned about trends created by the timing of some deposits in relation to events Camilla hosted or causes she supported. This becomes considerably more complicated when you consider the Andrew link. Certain deposits made into Camilla's accounts coincided with times when Andrew was reportedly looking for money to pay for settlement or legal fees. Although there was no evidence of direct transfers between Andrew and Camilla, the timing of the events raised the possibility of coordination or common financial plans. That is a significant number of coincidences. When royal officials realized the investigation's breadth went beyond ordinary unreported assets into potentially illegal territory in mid-November, Princess Anne was included. Those informed on the probe said Anne's response was one of dread. "This isn't just hidden money," she allegedly stated. William was briefed on November 25th, 3 days before Charles would learn the full truth. Palace legal counsel went over the documentation, the account structures, the timeline, and the potential implications. Anne's involvement proved crucial because, although at first she was inclined toward handling things quietly to avoid scandal, she concluded that protecting the institution required transparency, even if it meant destroying Charles's marriage and Camilla's position. This structure is designed to conceal ongoing financial activity from family, from palace officials, and from authorities. That level of planning suggests consciousness of wrongdoing. William's first concern was whether his father might be implicated, and whether Charles could have known about the accounts and failed to disclose them. The investigation turned up no evidence that Charles knew, but William realized that the question would unavoidably be brought up in public and that handling that perception would be nearly as challenging as handling the scandal itself. On November 28th, Charles was informed, and those in attendance described it as one of the most challenging briefings of his reign. Senior advisors showed him the accounts, the amounts, the timeline of their creation, and the mysterious sources of funding. At first, Charles was shocked. His question to advisors was devastating in its simplicity. "She's been hiding millions from me for our entire marriage," he said in a hollow voice. He continued to insist that there must be innocent explanations, administrative errors, or misunderstandings, but as he examined the evidence, the truth became inevitable. She had been hiding millions from him for their entire marriage while he had been publicly defending her, supporting her rehabilitation, and fully trusting her. "She has been hiding wealth that I was unaware of, even though I have been publicly defending her, encouraging her recovery, and having great faith in her." The confrontation took place at Clarence House that same evening. When Camilla entered the study at 7:15 p.m., Charles removed even his private secretary and most dependable aides, leaving only 2 protection officers within calling distance, standard security policy that could not be disregarded. Charles was seated behind his desk instead of in the casual seating area where they usually conversed, creating a barrier that was both emotional and physical. He laid out the financial documentation on his desk, including bank statements, account opening records, transaction histories, and corporate structures, all printed and arranged chronologically. At first, he didn't say anything, just motioned for her to look. She knew something wasn't quite right. He later told William that Camilla's initial response was denial, not of the accounts themselves, but of any wrongdoing. She insisted that these were old accounts from before their marriage, family money she'd kept separate, nothing that needed to be disclosed. However, as Charles persisted, pointing to transaction dates that clearly showed activity throughout their marriage and into her time as queen consort. Camilla's denials became less confident and more defensive. The turning point came when Charles confronted her with evidence of connections to people in Andrew's financial crisis, timing that suggested coordination. Camilla's composure broke when he asked her directly what she was involved in because it didn't seem like savings, but rather money laundering, receiving payments for influence, or something equally damaging. She insisted that she had been protecting the family, that Andrew had come to her years ago desperate for help navigating financial troubles, and that she had been trying to help without involving Charles in situations that would have forced him to choose between brother and propriety, and that the accounts had been Andrew's idea, ways to receive and hold money without direct connection to pay his debts or pay for legal fees. If that's true, Camilla was complicit in potentially illegal financial schemes to help Andrew avoid accountability. In any case, it confirmed Charles's worst fears. The woman he fully trusted had been involved in financial arrangements that she had purposefully concealed, arrangements related to the family member whose scandals had most damaged the monarchy. Charles asked the question that mattered most to him personally. Did she marry him with these accounts already in place, hiding this from him? Camilla's hesitant and qualified answer was essentially yes. She had some of the accounts before they were married and had opened others after. But she had never told him because she knew he would have insisted on their disclosure or closure, and she felt obligated to assist Andrew in ways that Charles couldn't officially support. Apparently, this justification infuriated Charles more than the concealment itself. He told her that every time he publicly defended her, every time he supported her rehabilitation, he was endorsing someone who was lying to him about important aspects of her life, and he asked if she realized what she had done to the institution. The amount doesn't matter. The source being public funds doesn't matter. What matters is that you concealed millions in assets, potentially received money from suspicious sources, and lied to me about it for years, Charles told Camilla, cutting through her arguments that the sums weren't huge by royal standards, that no public funds were involved, and that she had never used her position for personal enrichment but only to help family. That's not a family issue. That's institutional liability. From there, the conversation devolved into accusations and emotional outbursts that people outside could hear but couldn't discern. When Camilla came out 3 hours later, palace staff reported that she appeared broken, had smeared mascara, was moving erratically, and went straight to her private apartments without saying anything to anyone. Charles demanded a complete legal analysis of what was needed to remove her titles, that she leave Clarence's house within 48 hours, and that a statement be prepared explaining why this action was necessary. When advisors cautiously suggested that this might be too quick and that perhaps they should look into this further before taking irreversible action, Charles was unyielding and called for his private secretary and legal counsel right away. She acknowledged significant suppression of accounts related to Andrew's issues, he stated. That's sufficient. Whatever financial arrangement she was involved in, I will not permit the crown to be linked to it. At midnight, William was called to Clarence's house, where he discovered his father distraught but unwavering. Despite how it appeared, Charles told him that this wasn't an emotional response because she had created institutional liability through deception. And as king, he couldn't ignore that, regardless of his personal feelings. William agreed that action was required, but suggested more for a proper legal process, which Charles rejected every day she remained queen consort. What we know about this concealment is another day of institutional dishonesty, he said. The legal process to remove Camilla's titles turned out to be more complicated than Charles' urgency would have permitted. Unlike private citizens, who can simply divorce and be done, removing royal titles required parliamentary action, Privy Council involvement, and navigating constitutional precedent that had rarely been tested. The palace legal team spent the night of November 28th and the following day researching historical precedents. The closest analogy was the removal of titles from German relatives during World War I, but that involved foreign royals, not a queen consort. There was also the 1936 abdication crisis, but that was voluntary abdication rather than forced removal. Charles wanted to deprive a sitting queen consort of her titles because of financial misconduct, which had no direct precedent in contemporary royal history. The legal team concluded that a number of steps were necessary, including Charles formally requesting that Parliament take action through the Home Secretary and consulting the Privy Council regarding the constitutionality of such action. In order to remove the titles granted by letters patent upon Charles and Camilla's marriage, Parliament would probably need to pass specific legislation. Under normal circumstances, this process could take weeks or months. However, Charles instructed his legal team to use emergency procedures to make it clear to parliamentary officials that time was of the essence and to use every available mechanism to accelerate action. He believed that if Camilla's title was maintained while investigations continued, the Crown would be complicit in whatever impropriety the accounts represented. On November 30th at Buckingham Palace, senior government ministers and royal advisers formed the constitutional body that advised the Crown on matters of utmost importance. Palace Council presented evidence of undisclosed accounts, the amounts involved, the unsettling sources of some funds, and Camilla's admission of deliberate concealment. The meeting was unprecedented in modern times for its speed and subject matter. The legal argument was simple. Continuing the Queen Consort title under these circumstances created institutional liability and undermined public trust in the monarchy's financial propriety. Removal of titles was a proportionate response to a serious breach of trust affecting the Crown's reputation. The Privy Council advised that parliamentary action to remove titles would be constitutionally proper given the circumstances presented. At the same time that government officials were briefed on the situation and the King's request for emergency parliamentary action, the Prime Minister, after consulting with senior ministers and the leader of the opposition, agreed to introduce emergency legislation that would authorize removal of titles granted to Camilla upon marriage. The speed of this agreement reflected both the gravity of the evidence and the government's desire to support the monarchy through a crisis that could erode public trust in the institution.